All right, we begin a look at 1 John chapter 3. I'm going to begin by reminding us of what we read in the last two verses of chapter 2, because the passage actually starts already at chapter 2, verse 28, and then goes straight into chapter 3. But we already read chapter 2, 28 and 29. Children, remain in him, so that if or when he returns, we will have confidence and not be ashamed before him at his coming. We know that he is righteous, and therefore we know that everyone who does righteousness has been born of God. So this passage is now going to continue with the theme of being righteous, purifying ourselves, but it's mostly going to have to do with being the children of God, the way we've just been told. These are the people that God begets, that God brings to life. So, the first thing John does is marvel at how great God's love is, the Father's love is, in making us God's own children. So, behold, it's kind of an interjection. Lo, behold, same as this word. Behold, lo. In actual fact, grammatically, this is the aorist second person singular imperative of horao. So look. This is the plural, second person plural form. You can see the et ending. So look, it's actually a command. Behold, or look at, behold what sort of love. We know the word agape. This is an adjective meaning what kind of. Behold what kind of love, subject, the Father, indirect object, to us, and this is of course the most prominent me verb, the one that we learned our me verbs with, dido me. You can see that it's a perfect because of the epsilon reduplication. You can see the ka, except third person singular becomes ke. So the word means to give. Behold what sort of love the Father has given to us, so that we now live in this reality. It is now a love that remains with us because God gave it. So again, always trying to find a way of understanding it that majors on and focuses on the present implications, not just the past experience of having been given. So, what's the evidence of this love? I don't think this means in order that God didn't give the love so that something would happen. This is more like the result of the love. Look at this great love God has given us that resulted in this. Or maybe even just this is the evidence of the love. Look at the love that we are God's children, which is shown in the fact that we are God's children. So it actually goes in two steps. First it says we're called God's children, and then it assures us that we're not just called that, we actually are that. So that we be called. You see that this is the aorist stem, aorist passive stem. E, clay, fe would be in your principal parts. So drop the augment, keep the theta, put on the subjunctive ending after hina. So to be called, the fact that it's aorist doesn't affect the time frame in subjunctives, or at least not in this kind of subjunctive. So, behold what kind of love the Father has given to us, that we be called, this is what we're called, tekna theou, children of God. Now, just in case the author wonders, well, maybe they think we're just called that, we're not really that, it's just whatever, a metaphor, it's just he says, no, it's not just that we're called that, we actually are, and we are. So adding this line to make sure that it's clear that we're called this because we really are this. We're already God's children now, but we don't know what it's going to be like in the future. That's the point of the next sentence. Actually, not quite. There's one sentence in between. On account of this, now the question is, on account of what? On account of this, hakosmos, the world, genoske, doesn't know hemas, us. So he's going to clarify what it is that that results in the world not knowing us. So of course this is doesn't mean the world doesn't recognize who we are. Like we know our neighbors know us, Christian, non-Christian. The world knows who we are, but they don't really know who we are. They don't understand us. They don't agree with our priorities, so they can't figure out why we would live our lives the way we do. This is picking up the same point that was made in the previous chapter, where the author said that we shouldn't love the world or the things in the world, because if we do, the love of the Father isn't in us, because these are the attractions of the world, but they get in the way of our proper relationship with God. So if we're going to orient our lives around God's will, the world is going to see us as unexplainable, out of step, not doing the sorts of things that one would expect in a world that's run by the principles of the world. So the world doesn't know us, doesn't understand us. Why? Well, anytime you see the tutor, you have to ask, is it because of what he just said? Or is it because of what he's about to say? On account of this, namely, what I just said, it sort of works, but not really well. We are called God's children, and we really are. On account of this, the world doesn't know us. The world doesn't know us because we're God's children. Probably not. And the reason not is because the next part is a better explanation. On account of this, the world doesn't know us. On account of what? On account of what I'm about to tell you. Because not it knew him. The world doesn't know us because the world didn't know God, or didn't come to know God, or doesn't know God. Perhaps also implying didn't recognize Jesus. The world at large didn't recognize that in Jesus we see God as God really is. So not having recognized God, maybe both in the world and in Scripture and in Jesus, therefore they don't know us. We live out of step with the world's values because we live in step with God's values. Why doesn't the world know us? It doesn't know God. If the world would come to know God, our lives would make sense. So, whenever you see it, do you look back for what the this is, or do you look forward? Last time we saw one of these, I think we looked backwards. This time we look forwards. There's a couple more coming yet in this letter. Verse 2, beloved, looks nominative, it's actually vocative. Here's the author again directly addressing the readers. He calls them children in other contexts, implying his children, his beloved children, metaphorically. But in this context, we're God's children, so he doesn't call them children, as if they're also his children. He calls them beloved. Beloved now. In fact, we should probably understand that as now already, we are God's children. So he's just told us that, and we really are. But he's about to say, even though that's true now, we don't yet really know what's coming later, at least not fully. So, beloved, we are now God's children, and what's also true is that not yet, upo, it has been revealed, aorist passive, see the theta eta of phanerao, to reveal or to manifest. So, and it has not yet been revealed what we will be. Now let's look at that for a second. So we will be, that's esomatha. Amy, future, is esomai, deponent forms. Esomatha is we will be. But this is the puzzling word. It has not yet been revealed what we will be. Wouldn't you expect that to be a relative pronoun? I would have thought that would be the right word. It has not yet been revealed what we will be, what kinds of beings. Or if it was personal, then it would be, it has not yet been revealed who we will be. So why does the author take the word ti? So first of all, what is that word ti? Tis, ti is someone, something. You add an accent, and now it's who, masculine, who, feminine, and what? Neuter. So it's the proper word for what, but it's only the proper word for what if it's a question. So, what will we be? That would be a proper question. What will we be? So this isn't a question. And it has not yet been revealed what we will be. So in our grammar in English, we would expect this to be a relative pronoun. The Greeks used an interrogative pronoun. So here's a second example in this letter of something that we pointed out much earlier. In Greek, they tend to preserve the grammar in indirect speech that would have been the correct grammar for the direct speech. So imagine someone who wants to know what we will be, wants to get an answer to what hasn't yet been revealed. What question would he ask? This one. What will we be? And now the author is putting it into indirect speech. It hasn't yet been revealed what we will be. Greek is going to preserve the grammar of the direct speech and therefore the interrogative pronoun, even though it's not actually a question. So it is completely consistent with one of the ways in which Greek uses these both. Well, it doesn't only happen with relative pronouns and interrogative pronouns, it also happens with subjunctives and indicatives and so on. We'll see examples later on where the mood of a verb is retained that would have been the right one if it had been direct speech, but it gets retained when the speech is reworded as indirect. All right, that's grammar. Let's see how far we are. It hasn't yet been revealed what we will be. We know that. So now we're going to get an indicative rather than a subjunctive. Last time we had that plus a subjunctive because it was hina. We know that if he should appear, and again, this probably means whenever it should happen, whenever he appears. We saw that already in the previous chapter. We know that if he appears, we have parrhesia, we have confidence. Here we know something else. We know that if and when he appears, or when he appears, we will be like him. So this takes the dative, we're being like someone. It's actually called a dative of comparison. We'll learn that in Greek 3. This is to be like, homoios, masculine nominative plural, to agree with the subject. We will be like. So we is a nominative plural. We will be like him. Why? Because we will see, future of horao, opsomai, him just as he is. So this is referring to seeing God. God is the one whose face we cannot directly see in our experience in this life, but when Christ returns, when God's love is perfected, then we will see God as God is. And we're going to find out in just a minute why I say this is God and not just seeing the face of Jesus. John has already seen the face of Jesus. He's one of those eyewitnesses that he talked about in the first chapter. But he's never seen God directly. So he's going to talk about that theme further. But one day we will. One day we'll see God in God's completeness, just as God is. And everyone who has. Now notice again, we're using a relative pronoun in English, but we don't use one in Greek. That's not one in Greek, neither is that. This is the definite article, substantival use of the participle, the having person, the one who has, is how we'd often say it in English. Put a pas in front, and now it's everyone who has. What do we have? The hope. And then tautein, this hope. Everyone who has this hope. Now, in ancient manuscripts, this word appeared this way, and it also appeared this way. If we read it this way, then it's everyone who has this hope in him, in someone else. We're placing our hope in another person, in God. If you read it this way, then it's having this hope in ourselves. Now, it doesn't mean we trust in ourselves. It means we carry within ourselves this hope. So, are you one of those who has this hope within you? It's still a hope in God, but so the question is, do we read it as hope in themselves, or is this the one in whom they hope? Earlier translations use this reading. The better evidence is that that was the original reading, and so this translation goes with him. So this again is referring to God. This is our hope in God. Everyone who has this hope in God does this to themselves, purifies themselves, or each person who has this hope in him purifies himself. So purify, there's two words for holy, that one, hagnos, and then the one we learned before, hagios. They kind of mean the same thing. This one probably has more of the emphasis of being set apart, being especially designated. So you are holy as in set apart. This one has more to do with holy as in purified, kept pure, etc., etc. So, and this is the verb that goes with it. To become hagnos is to hagnidzo. So everyone who has this hope in him, in God, purifies himself, and then we get the standard of purity. Just as that person, hagnos estin, just as that one is pure. So we purify ourselves like that one is. So who's that one? Mentioned previously, in English we use this and that as the near demonstrative, the one closer to me, and the far demonstrative, the one farther from me. Greek does the same, except Greek also does it in texts. So if he said, just as this one is pure, he'd be referring to this person, the one he just mentioned. But the fact that he changes it to akanos means that he's looking back in the text to the person he was talking about before this last person. So he hasn't referred to Jesus directly for a while. This is a reference to Jesus. He's been talking about God, hope in God, seeing God. God is the one who's the Father. God is the one whom the world doesn't know. So this has all been about God. Everything is God when it's this, until he says, just as that one, the one I talked about before I talked about God. So here he's directly referring to Jesus. So the standard of purity for us is how Christ was. And again, John has made very clear, we never achieve the standard. We never claim we do. We call God a liar if we think we do. But we also never stop aiming for that standard.